I want to add one more sort of direction to this, and it's this. I think in your fascinating conversation with Jordan Peterson, you said the flip side of anxiety is creativity. I was, as soon as I heard that, I was like, I want to ask him. I don't think Jordan Peterson followed up that one specifically, but I'd love to know what you mean by that.
Yeah, no, Jordan did not follow up on that. I think he was too confused by some of my other ideas. So what I mean, what I mean by that is, well, first of all, let's even just take a step back. And the fact that we're so obsessed in our culture with anxiety is a problem, you know? And as a result of that, we then have this kind of focus on kind of like mindfulness or meditation, all these kinds of things. We're constantly trying to make our minds less anxious. Well, the reality is the human mind is anxious for a reason, because that is nervous energy. And that nervous energy is the source of a huge amount of creative ideas. And if we're constantly trying to make our minds less nervous and less anxious, we become less creative. We become more zen. We just kind of go with the flow and the way things are. And that's totally fine if you want to be part of a system and you want to go along and you want to trust everything around you in the architecture. But if you want to be alive to the possibilities of the moment, you have to tap into the fact that your brain has this nervous energy. And where does that nervous energy come from? It comes from the fact that the brain is not unified. The brain did not evolve to be a unified engine. It evolved to have multiple different sources of power and process going at the same time, so that it's in a constant state of inner conflict and tension. And that's why anyone who's a creative knows that all creativity comes out of a moment of tension, of conflict, either between you and your environment, or you just feel something isn't right. And then out of that tension and conflict comes flow. So creativity isn't endless tension, it's not endless anxiety, but that's the root engine. And then once you get that engine going, you can power it into flow and you can start to go. But you have to realize that when your brain starts to get anxious, that's not a negative thing. It's not a sign to get rid of the anxiety or kind of root it out or there's something wrong with me. It's actually lean into the anxiety, embrace the anxiety, have gratitude for the anxiety, and then leverage the anxiety into creativity, which then produces joy and all these other kinds of positive gains. So that's the kind of the beginning of a very natural process. And because we're so obsessed in our culture with happiness and having things too fast, and we get very uncomfortable the moment we encounter difficulties and challenges, we also get very self-conscious. We cut off a lot of these natural biological processes at the roots, rather than leaning into them and leveraging what is a moment of discomfort into a kind of long-term sustainable gain.
I love that. It's like anxiety is the signal, creativity is the response in the present moment. Joy is kind of that resolution, and then the flow that comes is where you produce your best work.
That's exactly right. No, that's exactly right. And there's many analogs of this in other parts of life. You know, I mean, grief, for example, no one likes to experience grief, but grief is a huge source of growth emotionally for us all. We all mature through grief. You know, we become aware more of the things we have and how to protect them through grief. And so a huge part, I think, of being a healthy, productive person is not to run away too fast from negative feelings, but to kind of lean into them enough to kind of get that positive, propulsive energy that they provide, and then kind of let it carry you forward. So you're not dwelling in anxiety. Certainly, if you've been experiencing long-term anxiety or it's a constant thing, I'm not saying that that's positive, you know, and I would never want anyone to kind of be in a long state of grief. But what I'm saying is if you suddenly have a moment of anxiety or something has been bugging you or you're concerned about something, a lot of the answer may come in terms of leaning into that and actually trusting that inner tension in your head to generate something that your conscious mind is not aware of, because your conscious mind is a tiny part of your brain. We vastly overrate the conscious mind. There's this huge engine sitting beneath it which can do an enormous amount of work. And a lot of that work is kind of shrouded in mysticism and mystery. And this is where you kind of get these kinds of Jungian things, which, as you may be aware from listening to the Jordan Peterson podcast, I'm not a Jungian. But there's nothing mystic or mysterious. You don't have to be a magician to think that your unconscious mind, like your stomach or your heart, is doing a huge amount of work that you're not aware of. And you want to lean into that kind of muscle power that is there. And if it's anxious perhaps for a good reason.
Yeah, vulnerability is another one. Like I'll throw into the mix there. We hear a lot on this show because that's something that we're trying to promote more in the workplace. And all the good things that flow from demonstrating that.